it's just such a privilege and a pleasure to welcome Anya to our summit. And I've been doing some research on Anya. It's quite fascinating, all the different things that you've been doing as a journalist, and also most recently, and I think it's very apt that we had the climate work that we're doing just before you're speaking. Your passion for climate action and climate justice. I could think of no better speaker to be with us and share your insights, your passions, but also just, there's one thing about talking, there's another thing about how we act. And so I just think that you have just this very space. And also, I'm going to do a plug. Anya also has, is it called the Golden Hour newsletter?
Yes, thank you.
To subscribe to. So if you've not already subscribed to it before Anya speaks, maybe get online there and subscribe to Anya's lovely newsletter too. But without much further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Anya, to speak for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. Thanks for inviting me. I'm overjoyed to be here. Any of you guys used to go to South by Southwest, like back in the day? Do you remember they used to give Bruce Sterling, like, the final keynote? He was the sci-fi writer, and he would just give this, like, amazing raconteur, like, hilarious. I'm not going to come up to that level, but I did think it would be fun to finish you guys out with a little bit of a provocation. And when Nate reached out to me and invited me here, I started thinking right away about what I was going to say, because like Catherine alluded to, I spend a lot of time right now writing about the intersection between climate and well-being, especially for young people. But the through line of my work is, I think I've recently discovered that there is a through line, and it's generational justice, which is thinking about issues as they impact younger people, future generations, sometimes elders as well. And that really is the line that animates my work and my interest in learner-centered education, in how new technologies and innovations can serve us rather than we serving them. And I think recently thinking about, like, how being on the side of youth means not automatically crossing our arms against the new, right? So not succumbing to moral panic or overly, valorizing the past. This is a fantastic place to be in, by the way. This is an incredible site. I don't know how many of you guys had a chance to, if you're not from here, to explore the Palazzo de Tres Culturas and the archaeological site that's back there that may be 700 years old. It might be a little bit around the same time as Teotihuacan. Children were sacrificed around here. Torquemada built that church over there. It's like a pretty insane place. And then there's the memorial upstairs to the massacre of 1968. But it's really a memorial to, it's not just a memorial, it's a living tribute to social resistance and resistance of the young, resistance of women, of marginalized groups, and the creative and fierce ways that people in this country, in this region, but also around the world have always stood up and said no, and said we don't agree with this, we want something different. So I'm on the side of all of that. I don't know about you guys, but here we are. We've got something really new and really crazy. I was happy to see Monica name check Charles Darwin, because, next slide, I thought I would talk about Darwin today because I don't know what AI is. I do not know what AI is going to be, but I know what AI has done. And what it has done in the short time, and I'm talking specifically about these large language models that have these eerie seance-like qualities of spitting out information and conversing with people and occasionally proposing marriage. These models are causing us to question what it means to be human, what it means to be intelligent, what's our place in the world. And so I compare it to, I'm presuming to compare it to the discovery of evolution, the evolutionary theory, the origin of species of the 19th century, because I know that that model, that publication of that theory, did the same thing to the imaginations of people in the Victorian era. There was so much upheaval around, what does it mean? What does it mean? Where are we? Who are we if we're not who we thought we were? Who are we if we're monkeys? Who are we if we were just evolved accidentally, randomly, and not created by a loving creator? So Darwin gave us this incredible message to go forward with, which is that the thing that makes species survive, and especially humans, is our ability to adapt to changes. So he had sort of the wisdom, but he also freaked a lot of people out, and his theory was taken in a lot of different directions that he didn't necessarily want, right? Next slide. So yeah, amazing biology, right? All the biology that we have, the incredible medicine that we have, biodiversity, understanding of our world, right? Understanding of humanity. I happen to be, on the side of, it's a good thing to decenter religious dogma. I mean, I'm a spiritual person, I'm a religious person, but I don't think that the religious leaders should be calling all the shots, so that was a positive. We also saw these terrible social theories that came out of, extrapolated from Darwin's work, that took Darwin's work in a darker direction, the quote-unquote scientific racism, oppressive ideas of social Darwinism, that it's somehow natural for some groups to be more oppressive over others, right? So these are things that he wouldn't have necessarily wanted, but that once the ideas were out there, they were taken in different directions. And surprisingly, one of the descendants of evolutionary theory is AI itself, which I think is really fascinating. As I started to prepare for this talk, I was looking a little bit more into what did Darwin actually think about these things. Next slide. And it's nice to know that he was an abolitionist. He didn't have perfect racial views, but he found that from his own travels in places where there were, oppressed groups, where there were slave rebellions in South America, he was like, it's so evident that these people, the darker skinned people, it's so evident that they're intelligent and that they have an ability to be in charge of themselves and of their lives. So he really was an ardent abolitionist. So that's nice to know that social Darwinism and scientific racism was not really Darwin's jam. Next slide. This is just I cannot explain this, but it does show that evolutionary algorithms, so the ideas that Darwin explored, lead directly to some of the AI that we have today. So just modeling on the model that he made of nature. Next slide. So with that image of Darwin and the breakthrough of evolution in mind, the mind-blownness of it, where we are right now, wondering, what does it mean? What is a human? What is creativity? What is intelligence? How do we demonstrate our place in the world? Is it even important that we demonstrate our place in the world? Or do we just be happy that we found that we're now going to hand it over to the robots and they're going to take it from here, right? Can we just give it up to the robot overlords and enjoy it, enjoy our lives as pets? But it's important to kind of say, no, we reclaim our autonomy, our agency, and we say we have the power to shape what the future holds. And we have to think then not only about the fears that we have about what happens if we get it wrong, but also about what happens if we get it right, right? Because this is a incredibly dire junction in our world, in our future. And we need everything that we can get. And we need to it's also a time for very determined optimism, because it is so easy to succumb to despair. There's a lot of reasons to do it, but we have to continue working towards a better future. And I think that we can do that if we make sure that we apply a moral framework to the work that we do. Next slide. So what's standing in the way right now of the AI beautiful future, right? I think pretty simple things like old-fashioned social relations and greed, and then some obfuscation thrown on top of the greed. So undervaluing the human contributions, not recognizing, being alienated from the product of our labor, right, in a very Marxian way. We think AI is a separate thing from us and not a thing that people built using people, right? AI is Soylent Green. Soylent Green is people. AI is made from people. It's made from people's contributions by people, and it shouldn't be seen as this alienated thing. It should be seen as something that we govern and we control. And then the reason human contributions are undervalued is so that the people that create and control AI can hoard the benefits for themselves and socialize the harms to others. It's a very simple move. It's happened for a long time. And then also I think what's standing in the way is some of the scary stories that we're telling about AI. Some people who don't like AI, or some people that are elevating AI by telling scary stories about it. So Krita hype, next slide, is a coinage of Cory Doctorow, where he says, and his great example of it is when people thought Facebook had this brilliant ability to have an algorithm that controlled your mind, like you have the spinning eyeballs, and you would just buy anything that they told you to buy. And also it destroyed democracy because the people just vote for whoever the Facebook algorithm told you to vote for. And this was a story that led to some very principled people told this story for very good reasons, but it also led to a lot of advertisers spending a lot of money on Facebook because they thought that they had built this incredible machine, which it turns out didn't really work exactly the way that they said it did. So when we tell stories about AI and the power that it might have to automate jobs or take work away from people, and then there are other stories that people tell about how AI might turn the world into paperclips. It kind of dazzles us and destroys our ability to say, well, what is AI doing right now? And is there really a good reason why you can't pay me for the work that I'm doing today? Just based on this idea that you might automate my work in the future. Next slide. The other things that we think about when we think about AI is that it exists actually in the real world, and it's made with energy, and it has actually drawbacks as well as potential benefits. And so we're living in a world where AI has current present-day drawbacks and potential future benefits. And the carbon footprint, next slide, of AI is one of those current present-day drawbacks, which means that we're making a trade-off when we use AI. We're using energy that we could be using for other things. And I think it's really important to think about that when we imagine its future contributions or where we might want to fit it in, right? Next slide. And so some of the really important, not overly hyped, but real criticisms of AI that are emerging have to do with protecting the creative work of people. And this is an op-ed by Molly Krabappel, who's done a lot of great work kind of elevating this idea that resistance actually is plausible. Resistance is possible. And it can be creative and it can be collective. And it's a good idea. It's not going to stifle creativity if you say, people should be paid for their work. Next slide. And I am one of these people, right? So I found out that my books are in the corpus, and it's a very weird feeling. It's like a spiritual stealing, right? Like if someone had the belief that their photograph was stealing their soul. I'm like, this was used to train the corpus, and I had no control over that. Some people, like John Grisham, has a lot of money, and he's suing. Some people have, Getty Images is suing, so they're going to get something back. I don't know what I'm going to get back. I hope that there's some benefit for me, and I hope that there's some recognition for everyone whose work has been used to train AI, not just every writer, but everybody who wrote a Wikipedia entry, everybody who provided data, because it's been the status quo for way too long that we just give up free data, which is then turned around and sold back to us. Next slide. And then the other thing, when we think about the criticisms that are real criticisms and not hype criticisms of AI, is that in order to make it, we had to train it, and we had to train it not to give back horrific things. And in order for that to happen, real people had to look at horrific things and train them away, right? And this is also what happens with every social network that we use. The moderators are people, oftentimes people in developing countries who make low wages, and they just look at horrific things all day long in order to shield our eyes from them. And it's such a pure distillation of the unfairnesses of the global economy that in order for us not to come across something that's ugly, we have to show it to another person first. And so these are just important things to think about when we think about what we would like AI to be, and what we should criticize it for, what we should think about in terms of the costs. Next slide. And then I'm going to speak a little bit more at length about what I think is going wrong in the positive applications of AI in an area that I know better than others, which is in technology in the classroom. So, we have a serious situation post-COVID. We have a lot of kids who didn't get the learning time in classrooms that they should have gotten. They weren't able to take advantage of remote learning in the same way. And so they don't have as much learning at the same age as previous cohorts of kids. There's a huge need for the only thing that we know that works, which is one-on-one tutoring and extended learning time to help these kids catch up. And there's a belief that AI might provide this kind of tutoring experience. But it's not doing it yet. Next slide. It's really not doing anything. It is a tool that teachers are having to interrupt their workflow in order to use. And just in this account by Natasha Singer, and also in other tests that I've done and other people I've talked to, it doesn't really do that much. Sometimes it over-explains, sometimes it doesn't provide the right answer. And at no time what it's doing is giving the social interaction and the reinforcement and the encouragement that kids need that are part of the tutoring experience. Tutoring is a relationship that happens between a person and a student. And we know this because when we've tried to do it remotely online, where you have like a chat line and you just call people up and you don't really know the person, it doesn't work as well. It works best when there's a person that knows the student and when there's a very small group or 1 or 2 people and they meet regularly. And so there just isn't really a lot of proof that an AI version of this is going to do anything beneficial that's going to be worth the time that the teachers and the students are going to put in. And this is really crucial. Next slide. Because this isn't cost-free, right? We know that teachers are overburdened, that their time is precious, and we're asking them to put their time and basically donate their time and their students' time to see if this stuff is going to work, so that then the bots can be sold back to them so that school districts can pay for ed tech instead of teachers. So it's this example of socializing the harm and cohorting the benefit, right? Because in this very good argument by Ben Williamson, there's extraction of teachers' unpaid labor and students' unpaid labor, and then it's used to make a product that's better, that's more beneficial, that is then going to be sold back to the school system. And plus, all of this is based on a very outdated individualistic mode of education, which is the tutoring itself relates to a narrow stream of goals in education, which have to do with basic knowledge and skills in literacy and numeracy. Tutoring hasn't been tested and doesn't really relate to the broader social goals of education, such as developing people's love of learning, their ability to collaborate, their creative thinking. None of this has been tested in terms of what one-on-one tutoring can do. There's no 2 sigma improvement in kids' experiences in, tutoring can be great for all kinds of things, don't get me wrong, for music or for sports or anything, but the types of goals of learning that we really want kids to have in the 21st century, getting them excited about learning, getting them engaged in learning, none of that has been shown that it can be done in a computer-driven model, at least not in a tutor bot type of AI language model. Next slide. So this is the situation that we're in. I think it's a pretty well summed up by Dan McQuillan, that we are in a situation where we have predicted benefits just around the corner, pie in the sky, and we've proven harms today, proven costs today. And what then is demanded of us, right? I'm not going to say shut the door on AI. I think I was in for a little bit of the conversation about, what shall we as Creative Commons do? And there was pretty roundly rejecting the idea that we should try to stop AI or control AI, because that's not a power that this community possesses or that anyone really possesses. So that's not really the answer. But I think it doesn't mean there isn't any answer. Next slide. And this argument is researchers and social movements can't restrict themselves to reacting to AI, to its machinery, but need to generate social laboratories that prefigure alternative socio-technical forms. So this is great, because this is exactly what you guys do, right? Social laboratories, new relationships of people to technology. This is the core competency of Creative Commons as a community. And I think this is really what's needed. It's needed to, yes, call out the harms, call out the damages, reckon the costs against the benefits, and then argue strongly in favor of increasing the benefits and socializing those benefits and sharing those benefits with everyone. Next slide. So this is kind of the brief, right? This is what you guys are at the beginning of understanding and discussing and communicating about, and I'd love to hear anything people want to share in the Q&A, but basically, how do we recognize that humanity has contributed to AI? Of course, my very important books, how do we recognize those? But also, like, the person in Kenya who had to train the stuff, and where does that recognition come in? All of the artworks, all of the creative works that have been sucked up into the belly of the beast, right? How does that get recognized? And then how do we enable a focus on what we really want AI to do, what's good, and what it could be doing that would be even better? Next slide. And then, of course, these are the types of things that you guys do, right? Enabling sharing and reuse, helping people indicate the purpose of the reuse, what you do want it to be used for, what we don't want it to be used for, and creating a social laboratory where we show what could be done. Next slide. So I see this happening, I'm reading in the media about what is happening as far as Wikipedia, which is a really important example, because large language models just could not exist without Wikipedia. And yet, how can they create, it's going to be an AI trained entirely on Wikipedia so that we can trust it? How is the benefit of people going to ChatGPT or some other free AI window? How is the traffic then going to be conveyed to Wikipedia? How are we then going to reward the editors that make it happen? At the same time, you need to diversify the editors who make Wikipedia, and can you use AI to train better editors, train editors to do it better, make it more accessible for people? Next slide. So this is just really important, right? Like it's, chatbots are made from us, and they must serve us. That's really the kind of bottom line there. Next slide. But how do we get them to do that? It seems like through the courts and also through union-based actions. That seems like what's working right now. So, copyright. This could give Hollywood pause. This is a federal judge finding that you can't copyright an AI piece of artwork. Next slide. Really incredible, triumph by the Writers Guild over the AI. And this article kind of breaks it down, like why this deal was so smart. Next slide. They're allowing writers to collaborate with AI chatbots. They're not allowing writers to be replaced by AI chatbots. And they're not worrying about how they might be replaced in the future. They're worrying about what's happening right now in the present. So it's not going to be using automation technology. It has to be complementary to humans. You have to hire the same number of people you were hiring before. And just because chatbots are used in the creation of a script, it doesn't mean that the writer is not credited with the script. Because one of the things they were worried about would be that they would use ChatGPT to spit out a horrible first draft, and then they would give that horrible first draft to writers and be like, you guys are now the markup crew. You're no longer the lead authors on this script. And they were like, no, that's not actually how this works. We're not going to allow you to credit the chatbot as the top writer of the script. Next slide. And so we didn't get bogged down in the science fiction version, which is interesting because they are, science fiction writers, some of them. We didn't protect ourselves against the technology. We protected ourselves against the humans on the other side of the table who are trying to screw us. This is great, right? Don't be confused by pay attention to the man behind the curtain, right? That's the important person. That's who you're negotiating with. You're negotiating with the people that hold the power, not with some all-powerful AI that's going to come and somehow eat your lunch. It only happens that way because we allow it to happen, or we are forced to make it happen because we didn't fight back. Next slide. And I want to give a positive example of this, of how AI is being used to help in the climate crisis through the mechanism of human accountability methods that exist, right? So the particular area of climate that I'm focusing the most on is why we haven't done anything yet, or enough, why we haven't done enough. And I think the reason we haven't done enough is because of our very human reactions of panic and denial. But the other thing is that we get very despairing because the story has been told that everybody's responsible, and then you feel very guilty for example, flying to Mexico City, which maybe, yes, you should, but the real question is, who's really to blame here? And what this group of people is doing is attribution, right? So they're attributing extreme weather events to particular changes in the climate, and they find extreme weather events even to the contributions of particular companies. And they're doing it incredibly fast, so that we can now have reasonable, meaningful discussions about when a 100-year flood becomes a 5-year flood or a 3-year flood, who's to blame, and we could even hold those companies potentially accountable in court. That's what they envision. Next slide. So collaboration, rapid response, and accountability. So where they're going with this, the attribution science has moved in an extraordinary way in just a very short period of time with international collaboration and sharing and open science. What they're hoping to do is develop a broader impacts-based attribution and projection framework, and then a communication platform with stakeholders. So this is both a science effort and a social effort. And it is, again, aimed at accountability, which I think is really essential. So data is really important, science is really important, and it's really important to know who's responsible, because that galvanizes people for action. There was a recent study coming out showing that of all the climate emotions you could feel, anger is the one that gets you really active. When you have someone that you can hold responsible, potentially, there can be change. Next slide. And just as a way of like bringing it full circle, back to the beautiful discoveries of Darwin and the imagination that the imaginary creativity that it brought out in us as humans as we started to think about how the world is all connected, how people are all connected, how animals are connected, discovering the natural world and plants, right? That they have these natural histories embedded in them and everybody's got a genetic story inside of them. This changed our thoughts about who we are as people in a way that is really beautiful and poetic. And AI is doing that too. And one of my favorite examples of this is the nascent science of AI-based human-to-animal communication, right? So they are listening to whales, they're listening to birds in the forest, and they're trying to use large language models to come up with some way of hearing what they're saying in some meaningful way. And I have no idea why this is the image that was generated. The prompt was a blue whale talking on the phone, but I just have to think that it's like a message of a weird whale human that's gonna come and like haunt us all in our dreams. This is amazing science, not only because it is, I hope we can talk to whales on the phone one day, but I also just think it's just really cool. It's the kind of thing that gets kids excited about science and gets us all wondering about the beautiful biodiversity around us and wanting to learn more. So that's the kind of use of AI I would like to see more of. Next slide. Here's another example of how I'd love to see AI used more in education by teachers who are empowered to do it in creative ways that are small, that are never gonna show up on a standardized test, right? This is a teacher who used AI to learn to code. He didn't know how to code, but he used AI, ChatGPT told him how to code a Raspberry Pi to get an automatic camera so that when the bird feeder had a bird in it, they would take a picture and it was going to Google Photos and everybody can see it. And this is great. Anybody can be a coder, right? This is a person using AI for the person's purposes, not the AI coming in and being used for the AI's purposes. And it's probably not going to make anybody rich. It also, harkens back to the Darwinian idea of discovering animals, so I like that about it as well. How do we get more of this? I mean, God, like it would be this, it's this world where teachers have time, where they have time to experiment, where they have time to learn new things themselves and model learning for their kids. Where they feel supported, where they have a community. This guy shared it on Twitter. I don't know what's happening with Twitter. It's probably not going to be a great platform for talking to other people very soon. But this is the ideal. And, how could it work that ChatGPT could, instead of pushing its way to the front of the classroom and saying, I want to be the tutor, maybe AI could be like, hey, I'm just going to sit in the back and generate your grade reports or your grade book, or I'm just going to observe what's going on here and give you some information that might be useful, actually automate some labor and not the fun stuff, do the boring stuff. Let's have ChatGPT do the boring stuff so that people can do the fun stuff. Next slide. So this is the crossroads that we're at. I love this quote from Carl Sagan, and he talks about how when we give up our agency and we act like the technological future is just coming at us like an asteroid, bad things happen because people in power steer them that way. And then the other option is that we might take control ourselves and take control of this transition and turn it into something that's actually better for people. And then the final quote is from Charles Darwin, next slide, where he talks about how when he started to understand the natural history, right, which means the history of every species, that it had these different twists and turns and these different stories and wrong blunders and wrong ways, that it helped him appreciate every tree and every bird. The way that you could appreciate any great mechanical invention. So he says, if you've never seen a ship before, you might think that it just arrived here and it's just this amazing creation like a meteor, right? But if you know how a ship is made, the labor, the experience, the reason, even the blunders of all these different people. So let's think about that. Let's think about AI as a mechanical invention that is a sum up of the labor, the experience, the reason, and even the blunders of so many people, including each of us. That will help us take into account exactly what it is, neither more nor less, and also maybe what it could be. Thanks.
Well, I think this is just a fantastic way to, your keynote, Anya, is just like you might be the last keynote, but boy, have you given us some food for thought. And also, you've given us some action points for Creative Commons there, which I was quickly note-taking. I hope all of you were too. And I just, some of the things you're saying about what I loved about your talk was about how that balance, about acknowledging there's harms, but also looking at, look, these are things that we could possibly get from this and have an advantage from, and be able to do some of the things that were maybe unimaginable that we could have. The Raspberry Pi thing with the bird feeder, my goodness, what a joy for those kids to watch that. Also, they're learning, they're doing things, they're learning about nature, learning about coding. It's an amazing thing, and their teachers helping them with that. I am not here to talk to Anya. I'm here to get your questions, because it's now over to you. And I know this is towards the end of our time together, but I think Anya's raised some really incredible questions for us this afternoon. So I'm looking at my first volunteer speaker out there. So questioner, who would like to ask the first question? Oh, it's the cameraman. Sorry, I thought you were standing to ask the first question. I thought, great, a first volunteer. Brilliant. I love a willing volunteer. Over to Cable. Could somebody hand him a... Oh.
So Anya, you talked a little bit about how commercial entities can extract, and how the man behind the curtain may be wielding the power. And of course, several of the big AI entities today are big commercial entities. One of the things we've talked about at the summit is the idea, or the possibility of what would it look like to have public training models? What would it look like to have public infrastructure for AI so that the commons truly could control its data, could decide whether it was opting in or opting out, could build AI programs based on a certain set of values, which may not be the set of values that a corporate entity would have. Do you have any thoughts about that, or suggestions or guidance for us as we mull those ideas?
I mean, I know it was hard the first time when we were talking about open source, like web browsing and open source networks, and there was a lack of resources and also lack of understanding amongst the wider group of people about why this was important. I do think we're at an inflection point where there is a lot of, and I'm gonna name check Cory Doctorow again, like and bleepification of these networks. They finally gotten to the point where they're so bad to use that people are looking for alternatives. So how do you make that case really strongly that it should be that the alternative should be there? And in terms of media, one way that this can happen is if you really allow people to benefit directly from participation in such a corpus. Like if you join this AI network, you'll get paid, or you'll get back some of the benefit of it. Maybe that could be a way that it could grow as a cooperative model.
So I'm looking out at other volunteers. Thanks for quoting Monica. That should be there. So you were quoting Monica in the talk. No pressure.
A quote of Charles Darwin, inspiration for us both. You mentioned about taking control, and that's something we talk a lot about too in the open access movement, and that it's really a David and Goliath battle, and I think we see that in this AI discourse as well. Do you have advice for organizing? What advice do you give to David when going into battle with Goliath?
Yeah, I mean, David's a terrible example, right? Because he was all by himself. But actually, the way that people win is together. And also, power concedes nothing without a demand. So I think that we're seeing these two examples, class action suits and union organizing, is what's working. And yeah.
There was also Malcolm Gladwell's talk about David and Goliath, where David wasn't as disempowered as he might have first appeared, which I always think is a fascinating take on a story, that maybe we actually are more empowered than we think, even with the battles we face ahead. And I think it was so fascinating you were talking about open science, with our work in open science and the work that we're thinking about and how we get that knowledge and how we share that to tackle, as Cable, you always say this, our most pressing problems if we don't do that together. But I'm now looking out for more volunteers, and so, but thank you, Monica, for that. Are we all waking up a little bit out there? Oh, Jocelyn, was that a hand? No, it wasn't a hand. Sorry, it was just you brushing your hair. Sorry about that. Oh, great. This is our friend from 20 Million Minds.
So, I really love that you... Hi, my name is Kayla Nagel. I'm the OER program manager at the Michelson 20 Million Minds Foundation. I really love that you referenced Darwin. I think that sometimes we look at like the history of our understanding of evolution. Darwin gets a lot of the credit, and then the social theorist, but also biologist, Peter Kropotkin's concepts of mutual aid are also very much underpin the evolution of species overall. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the concepts of like mutual aid in this type of context.
Oh God, thank you so much for bringing that up. That's so awesome. Right, so Darwin, fairly or unfairly, was credited with this idea that like it's all predator and prey, and it's sort of very similar to like Leviathan, like war of all against all. And then Kropotkin's theories, which I think are more social, are more about like, but species also help each other, and there's different kinds of relationships. There's commensalism, where they're just sharing. There's symbiosis, where they're helping each other. And then there's, the parasites. Nobody really likes parasites, but they're not predators. They're not killing their host, right? So yes, there's a lot more richness, and then there's the ways that different social species, and obviously like all of E.O. Wilson's work, where like there's emergent properties of civilizations that are way more complex with certain kinds of like insects and things. So yeah, we have a huge, in the natural world, we have a huge range of social relationships to choose from when we are looking for examples of how to be in the world and how to interact with each other, and what we can create and how we can be more than the sum of each one of our parts, and it's not zero sum, right?
Thanks, Caitlin, for that question. That was great. So, again, I'm looking out there. Brilliant, thank you. Who's going to hand the microphone? Great. It just takes a wee bit longer to get the microphone to people. There we go.
Hi, well, thank you for bringing up the issue of human labor behind AI. I've been hearing a lot about and discussing a lot about that topic these days, and I think it's great because it's something that it's always behind, but also I wonder how it could still be kind of a dirty secret if we are talking about the 3 or 4 or 5 most powerful and important and big companies in the world. That's something I just can't understand. What is your vision about that?
You mean why there's been so little work to hold accountable? The work the labor that enables this.
Yeah, when you showed that slide about the dirty, very unpaid, not unpaid, but very bad paid work behind AI and automatization, and people suffering to clean
yeah, and not only in AI, right? Every single social network, YouTube and
absolutely.
Facebook.
So how could it still be? I mean, we are talking about the biggest companies in the world. What do you think about that?
I think that people would love to believe in the magic of technology, and it's a myth that we all kind of collude in a little bit. And also, in general, as people, like it's seeing the dirty work, or fully honoring, not dirty, but fully honoring all the work that it takes to bring us into the positions that we're in, is a lot. And that's something that, as we are in an increasingly complex society, sometimes we purchase that distance in a lot of different ways. And so, I mean, Uber is also an example of that, right? Like, oh, you push a button and a car comes. No, a guy sleeps in his car and drives 16 hours a day. Oh, you push a button and your food comes. No, a guy crossed the Darien Gap to come and be on an e-bike to ride 20 hours a day to get your food. Like, that's a reality that is tricky to recall. It makes us feel bad. And we would prefer to have a shiny app instead to hide.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And I think the other, to your point about LLM and the training and things, it was really interesting because now with content moderation, they're saying that LLMs can do it, and that's going to be the solution. And you're like, okay, I can understand that a little bit, but then where's the human accountability? And it's really interesting that we're having content moderation conducted by more technology, but it's not it's a really and it's just so tricky and really complicated. But I really appreciate you asking that question. Thank you. Great, Shannon.
Hi, I'm
You
Shannon.
have the mic. That is really quick.
You know. Well, I actually used to work in data labeling. I was at Scale, which is one of the major providers for labeled data of all of these AI companies. And I'm curious, how much do you think the people need to know how the sausage gets made? Like, I think this is true for almost every industry, right? Like politics, for example, probably one of the well-known black boxes of the world. Like, how much interest is there actually to know how technological systems like this work? And what is an institution's responsibility to share this information? And how do you get people to care?
Love it. Well, the answer is embedded in your question, how the sausage gets made, right? In the progressive era, we had muckrakers, we had Upton Sinclair showing the dirty work and showing just how gross it was and just how much suffering went into these unregulated industries. And that did work. People don't like to feel tainted by these things. And it does change behavior, and the social and the moral element of it, I think, can be very strong as long as you can be very blunt about it and demonstrate the harms in a way that is coherent and also offer a solution and an alternative, which I think, the big lie of the people in power is that this is how it has to be done.
There's only one way. Yeah. Oh, great, Ian.
So, Catherine just brought up content moderation, and we're talking about labeling, and you brought up in your presentation how a lot of the sort of negative labeling has been outsourced to Kenya and other developing regions. It seems like somebody still has to watch the bad stuff to prevent it from getting into the system. What do you think a more equitable system for sort of sharing that harm, if we can use that term, or maybe, making sure that fewer people, or I don't know, what's the solution there?
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, who keeps the porn off of Wikipedia? Like, how does that actually work? Are there people here that know the answer to that?
You did a presentation of Wikipedia.
Yeah, I mean, like that's a thing that exists, and it's run by volunteers, right? They don't outsource that to people that have to do really shitty jobs. So it must be possible somehow. Maybe it means that there's less things, or that the things move more slowly, in order for there not to be like cut off fingers and things in the mix as you go along. Maybe you have to slow down the conveyor belt.
Darius, do you want to come in? And you did the presentation yesterday, and I think it was mentioned, Wikipedia was mentioned in the talk, so it'd be great to...
It's a genuine question.
No,
Darius Milnik here, Wikimedia Foundation Board. First of all, I really appreciate your presentation. I think you summarized a lot of stuff we've talked about. Amanda had a wonderful presentation about ghost work, which you're referring to as well. Regarding Wikipedia, I think one point I wanted to make, and I hope you will comment on this, the biggest risk, people don't realize the biggest risk for Wikimedia projects in general is, first of all, becoming irrelevant. So even if it's slightly less convenient to use than the LLM models, it will be a problem for us. But the other problem that we have that people don't think about is that even if we are so happy that somebody's using our content, and we are, because we are an open knowledge project, the biggest problem in the long run is if LLMs use our content as they might, they will not bring us editors.
Right.
So this is the biggest risk, and ultimately, the phenomenon you described, that the fact that these volunteers all over the world are contributing to the common knowledge might actually end, because people will stop contributing. And we saw that before with voice interfaces like Alexa, for example, right? Alexa also makes, or Google Voice, Google Assistant makes this barrier between the user and the producer of knowledge. Yeah. But now this barrier is even bigger and without attribution. So I'm wondering to what extent you see this as problematic, because to me it's like one of the biggest risks, the lack of attribution, which we care about, and the lack of new editors for Wikipedia.
I mean, yeah, I think as indicated in that article, like it's a violation of the spirit of Wikipedia that actually could put it out of business. And so there needs to be a negotiation, and the negotiation can't just be a supplication. Like it has to be coming from a position of power, understanding that that LLMs don't exist without Wikipedia. So what if Wikipedia raises money and sues under the same kind of claims as Getty? You know, like, or threatens to? Where do they go from there?
As you look at Reddit community, for example, Reddit community revolted against raising the bar for usage of the content. Our content is much more opinionated and feeling very strongly about our content meant to be open. Yeah. So as long as we do not have like a very sensible new license or new philosophy of licensing this content that will specifically address AI, I don't think we'll be able to do that.
You don't think it's possible to create a license that balances these needs and these purposes?
Well, that's the question to somebody at the podium.
I mean, this is what we've been talking about. Just you know, we're kind of at the moment the discussion. A lot of the discussions around, for example, artist preference signaling. So, what could that look like? I think the debate on licenses is still out there. I think there's issues around marking, so there's more transparency. And there's also issues around, I think you touched, others have touched upon this, about, and I think it was on your CC to-do list, about a data set or a training set that people can rely on, that's in the public interest, that people know that this is something that is doing good, rather than handing information to those that are going to benefit from it and not in the public interest. So these are all discussions that we've been having over the past days, and everyone, I think, would all agree that we've all come with different perspectives, and so not one artist is the same, and artists come with different, or creators come with different viewpoints. Some don't want to use AI at all. Some want to use it, but in the public interest. And we had a wonderful discussion yesterday with an AI artist who's pushing the boundaries of creativity. And so we have all this gamut of interests and ideas, but also it's really been important to have that variety of viewpoints too. But on an AI license at the moment, when we talk to different folks, whether it's the lawyers, technologists, it's just not landing there. It's more landing on norms and practices and standards. But things can change, and these court cases could change things and move things. And we're being called upon to look at these issues, because when it came to copyright back all those years ago, the early 2000s, when it was very much a Web 2 world, and a very different world today, we created a suite of licenses, as you all know, which was a variety of options for folks' different preferences. So if you wanted to share fully, there's a preference for you. If you don't, there's other preferences. And now in this world of AI, it's really interesting, because again, creators are looking for ways to share and ways to do things. And as an organization that wants the commons to succeed, we do not want to see a commons diminish into we want to see a flourishing commons. So it's all about these balances. Sorry, I should not have taken the floor. We've we've still got a few minutes to ask Anya questions. So who would like to ask the final couple of questions? Because I think, can somebody tell me time? I think we're coming towards the last 10 minutes, is that right? 5 minutes. Oh, Monica, you're very good, thank you. You've had practice at this. So, 5 minutes. We've got Anya for 5 more minutes. Please indicate anyone who'd like to ask a question. Great. Great, thank you.
Well, thanks for your presentation. Do you know AI initiatives that are heading towards licensing or attribution? You mentioned XIDA, right? And any repositories on Hugging Face, for example, or any public initiative on AI? Because if governments have public television channels, would not be the case that we have a public social network, a public AI tool, government bodies specialized on this, because just regulation seems eternal catching up, a cat and mouse game, and we are on this corporate era of internet, all this big tech issue. We were talking about this on a workshop and at the launch, and we noticed that the problem in AI is not very different from the problem in social media. So, which in turn relates to business models, investment strategies, venture capitalism, investment funds, and ultimately income-driving capitalism. So all the interests of the world's elite in 1% of the world. So I wanna hear more about this for you.
Yeah, these are all great ideas, and you probably know a lot more about them than I do. Personally, I like to see models where creators share in the benefits for participation. You know, and I mean, Substack has a lot of flaws. I joined Substack because I can easily get paid and participate, and I also own my email list, which is very different from followers that you gather on a platform that then disappears. Yeah, I mean, I could see the idea of having, you know, if people want to become part of a corpus of it, to create to train a language model, and they're agreeing to do that, and then they're going to, when people make derivative works, benefit from it, right? And just one tiny example, I do have a friend who's coming from the world of public media who did a fellowship at Stanford, and he's now joining Stanford, working on an AI corpus trained on public media. So then it's trustworthy information about current events, and it's constantly being added to. So in the media world, that is an experiment underway.
So I think we've got 2 minutes, Monica, am I right here? But yeah, 3 minutes. So who would like to ask the last question to Anya before we thank Anya for her wonderful presentation? No? Any takers? Any takers? Monica, go for it.
So I think sort of a subtext that has been discussed in particularly in the context of like who's doing some of this like review of content, and you know, you mentioned Kenya, it's probably happening in low and middle income countries. Everything that we do is influenced by the systems of oppression that are baked in to our everyday lives. Of course, AI is probably amplifies all of that. If we are turning to regulation to help like equilibrate some of those systems of oppression, you know, how do we see that like we can overcome that when it's like the people in power who are making the regulations? You know, it's so much easier for these big companies to outsource these difficult things to places where labor is cheap. There's such a strong incentive to that. Like, what are the mechanisms that you can employ to make things more equal, given that like in everything that we do from voting and like global north sort of, you know, the majority will impact how you can right these wrongs.
I don't know if it's like being here in this like 1968 like you know, environment in this university, but like I just want to say like solidarity, right? And like making common cause with those workers who maybe don't want to be doing that work, and figuring out how we can assist them in organizing for their own change, and also drawing as much attention as we can to the oppression that this is enabling or depending on, and that, you know, democracy, right? Lobbying for these types of things to become more ethical. Among all the other things that we have to do these things because we don't want to be collaborating in oppression.
So that is us at the end of our time together with Anya. Could you all please show your appreciation to Anya? Thank you so much.